This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke and Ewen McKenzie. The All Blacks versus the Springboks at Eden Park. Perhaps the most anticipated match since the last Rugby World Cup. The teams have been selected. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's a big game, and I think we talked the other day, selections were going to be interesting. I think South Africa held off and then named their side, so I think Eddie was right in terms of their approach. It'll be the high ball, fairly direct approach. So I don't think there's going to be much lateral movement. They'll play hard and then maybe shift the ball after that. So better back row for them. So not really surprised with their selections in the end. So I think that there's it's going to be whether the All Blacks can deal with that. And I was actually looking at some stats. The Finn Fruin's written another great article about the All Blacks, which I've been reading and digesting, and he makes a good point that under the Robertson era, their discipline, the yellow card situation, they're the most yellow carded team in the top 6 or 7 teams in the world. So they've done 16 yellow cards. So that's really one a game. So yellow cards makes a difference in big games. So that's they're averaging one a game. Now, I'm not saying that that's all them. They're actually the least penalised side in the top sides, but they've got the most yellow cards. So that could have us. So I say that every week, but it does matter. Yellow cards cost them against Argentina last game, and I think that'll be an important part where they can control that side of it. And if you think about it, they've come off an era. They had a really good side there, and then they've obviously gone into a bit of change. Some of their experienced players have all left, not dissimilar to the 80s when they had a great side. And it took them 4 or 5 years to sort of get back into consistent, form. It took them the early 90s there. They sort of in and out, and the Wallabies were able to beat them sort of 50% of the time. And they're probably in the same phase at the moment, that rebuilding phase, and it takes a little bit longer. New coach. So all the little things are going to matter. They've made a few changes to their side as well. So I'm not convinced about the back row setup, but they've clearly gone for a bit of size up front. And, they changed one of the wingers there to try and maybe deal with the aerial attack side of it. So, it's set for a big game. I'll be interested to see how it goes.
All right. So, Eddie Jones, your introductory remarks, having assessed the team selections, what did you see?
Well, just going on what Ewan was saying, I think, both teams are in that transitional phase where a lot of their senior players are still really good players, but they're just probably coming off a little bit, and therefore there's more inconsistency in their form. They're still capable of playing really well, but they just don't have that consistency when they're at their absolute best. And the young guys are coming through, don't have the experience of Test rugby, not quite there. So there's gaps in both teams, and they're both, both coaches are trying to build a team towards the World Cup. So, I think it'll give you a good indication of where both teams are in terms of their transition to the next team. But I struggle a bit with all the commentary about the game, how important it is. It's a test between South Africa and New Zealand. It's an important test, but it certainly doesn't define, Robertson as a coach or some of the criticism that's been hit towards Robertson Erasmus in terms of what he's doing with South Africa. Both have got very difficult jobs at the moment. People don't realise how difficult it is.
Mm. So with that, when you say the difficulty of doing it, what are the really hard things, Eddie Jones, from a coaching point of view that you've got to focus on to manage those issues that you've just mentioned?
Well, it's getting the timing right of when you start taking those senior players out of the team, stop selecting those senior players. And they're always difficult calls, mate. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. But you just look at someone like Beauden Barrett, who's still an extremely capable Test player, but he's certainly not the player he was when they won the World Cup in 2015. and so he's had a long time at the top, and it's how long, most players have maybe a period of 4 to 5 years where they're at their very best. And now they're in that difficult stage where they're just coming off. McKenzie was going to be the guy that was going to be the star for them. But again, he hasn't quite got it at test level yet. And that's not to say he won't, because I'm sure he's still maturing as a player, because he came in as that younger guy, and he can still mature into a very, very good test rugby player. So there's dealing with the timing of exiting the senior players and bringing in the young players.
Ewen McKenzie, how difficult is that when you do have the context and the environment around those changes being heightened? And as Eddie Jones said, there's plenty of hype around this game, and certainly the reaction last weekend in New Zealand to the loss against Argentina, where some commentators referred to the All Blacks as the dumbest team, the dirtiest team, and there's this massive swirling storm that sits around you. How as an elite coach do you manage that?
Well, I mean, journalists are obviously they're paid to get people to read their stuff, so and they don't always write the headlines either. So it's a little bit frustrating. I mean, plenty of teams have lost in Argentina. And in fact, Argentina's won in New Zealand, so I don't see how. I think Rassi made that point the other day. Argentina won in New Zealand recently, so I don't think that it's almost demeaning to Argentina to think that you can't lose to them. They're a good side. Eddie's already talked about that. They're both countries have got a very passionate and very focused support base, so they're very passionate about their team, and they're used to their teams winning. That's one of the things you've got to deal with, is that they're used to their teams. And Australia's been going through, came off a winning era, and then went into a decade where we couldn't win the big things, So Bledisloe and World Cup, etc. So that's what happens. It's a bit of a cycle. It's a question of how long you're in that at the bottom, and when you start climbing again. I think that the coaches are. Rassi's been doing it for a long time and sort of investing, and he's got probably more depth. And Robertson's doing the same thing, trying to bring new players to the fore, but still trying to win games to appease, the fan base and the media and whatever else. But it's difficult. It's a really difficult period, but you've just got to work through. And now, we saw Faf come back into the Springboks squad. He's not in the group, but. So the easy thing to do is go back and look for the short-term outcome, which is you just pack the team full of experience and hope that's going to be all right. But Eddie's already made the point that they're already coming down the backside of the mountain, those guys, and sure, that on any given day they can be brilliant, but you've still got to make the investment in the next players. So, when you look at if you look at the All Blacks selection, for instance, they've dropped Holland back to the bench. Now, he's been doing quite well for them in the second row. He's been winning a lot of line-outs for them, but he's now back to the bench, and they've put Tupavai back into the second row. I can see that, but Barrett's 31, Scott Barrett's 31, and the future's probably going to be Tupavai and Holland in the second row. That's probably where they're going to be long term. So I guess they're introducing those guys. They're in and around the environment and around the big games. I don't understand the Parker selection. Satiti's been a very good player. They've got a couple of other. Satutu's another one that's been excellent in Super Rugby. So I don't know the ins and outs of what's going on there. They've still got good players to really good players to choose from, but they're clearly massaging that. If you look at the bench for the All Blacks, when you've got Tamati Williams and Lomax coming on, that's a pretty good front row to come in later in the game. So they're clearly managing their team around playing against the Springboks at the start of the game and also finishing well against them, particularly in up front, where traditionally they've been strong with their forward bench coming in. But the Springboks have only picked a 5 forward bench, which is unusual for them. Normally they go a bit heavier than that. So there's the game tactics, and then there's this. No one else can do it. The coach has to be the one to bring the next bunch of players on, and it just doesn't happen overnight. So you've got to be doing that in the background. You don't get any credit for it. It's nice if Jonah Lomu turns up or something like that and just steamrolls everyone, and everyone goes, "Oh, what a great player, what a great find." But it'd be nice if you had those sort of players, but sometimes you don't. And you've got to allow players to gain experience. And some guys, like we saw it with Toole in the last game, you don't know if he's going to be able to make the step up, but you put him in the environment, he excels. So there are players like that out there. And so both coaches, in a way, are trying to do that. They're trying to manage that, but also make sure they win because that's what everyone's used to, right? The fan base in Australia has been a little bit starved of that in the last decade or so, but now they're getting a thirst and now they're watching, so the expectation's going to start piling onto the Australians that they win every week too, so they'll experience some of that pressure as well.
So, Eddie Jones, during the week, a couple of things caught my attention. One was Scott Robertson talking about and acknowledging fear in and around the preparation of the team and his sort of views on how the game or how he was feeling about the game, acknowledging that there was some level of fear. And Robertson Erasmus spoke of sort of a nervous week. What's behind that? Why would they be talking about fear and nerves as they prepare their teams for the week?
Oh, it's a new age of vulnerability, mate. Everyone's going to be vulnerable now. It's seen as a good sign as long as you don't lose. Well, that's the reality, mate. Every time you prepare a side, you're fearful of. Like every time I go to a game, I sit there on the bus and thinking, are we going to turn up today? Because you never really know, right? Until you get a really good team that are going to be at it all the time. And until you get that team, what do they say? If you get one champion team in your career, you've been blessed to have coached. The other times you got a team, you're just trying to get them to the post, you're trying to get them ready, you're not quite sure. And both of them are probably not sure of their teams now. Like we had a fascinating discussion here this morning in Sacramento. We had Ron Adams come in who won 4 NBA championships as assistant coach, Chicago Bulls, Portland. He's been with Golden State Warriors. And we were talking about like two of the greatest teams that have been Chicago Bulls and Manchester United. Both after their unbelievable run where they basically, they could not lose those teams at some stage. And now they can't buy a win between them. They can't buy a win between them. And it just goes to show you how hard it is. And this is the process, as Ewen said. South Africa and New Zealand are trying to do that on the run. They're trying to do it against huge expectation. Like, it's not an easy task. So any criticism of the coaches, I think it's just way, way off. And, it's just uneducated, Wild West, social media crap, mate.
Yeah. All right. So, Carl Dixon will be the referee. What sort of impact, Eddie Jones, will that have on the match at Eden Park, where the conditions will be there's showers early, clearing to a dry night around 15 degrees. So the impact of the referee on what we are actually going to see on the field.
Well, it seems like a normal night in Auckland. Rain coming in, right. Slippery pitch. How often is it going to rain? Not quite sure, but it'll definitely rain. Look, he's a good young referee. He's certainly confident. He tends to use the TMO a lot. So, the TMO is not going to have an easy day in the office. He's going to be working. So World Rugby better have 2 paychecks ready for him because he's going to be doing a lot.
I think he's an Australian guy I've never heard of. Right. So it'll be interesting.
And he allows a bit of contest around the breakdown. So I think it'll be quite a high penalty game. I think both teams will probably go hard at the breakdown. I would imagine particularly in those conditions where the movement of the ball is probably going to be a little bit difficult because the ball will be slippery. I think it'll be a highly contested, high penalty game. It's going to be won by the team that can get enough field position, and when they get down, they get enough points.
Ewen McKenzie?
Yeah, well, I don't know a lot about the referee, but I think confident he's always appeared to be pretty confident. So I think he'll go out there and try and assert himself. So hopefully when I was talking about the yellow card situation before for the All Blacks, well, the second highest is South Africa, so they'll be pretty willing, and so that part of the game will be the discipline side will be a big part of it. But I think it's going to be an attritional game, and that's how the New Zealand have picked their team for that. But there's still lots of question marks about what happens after that, and again I'll go to some of the stats that Finn was talking about in his article. He was talking about the kicking, about where the All Blacks have been playing their rugby in the last period of time, and in a way they've been trying to, run their way out of trouble. Like they've always been that sort of counter-attack side, but at the moment they're a little bit lost. And so when you look at the statistics, when they lose, they don't kick much. It's a 21 average game when they lose, and it's a 28 average game when they win. So, the kicking side of it, they've probably tried to run themselves out of trouble in recent years, and that's probably not working. They're probably the decision making there, and that's probably been upset a bit by. They've had a lot of change at 9, and then 10 they've been in and out. Eddie talked about McKenzie and Barrett there. Like there's been different. They've sort of been oscillating between that, so there hasn't been that sort of certainty. And I don't know where they are up to in terms of their game development. That's been dictated a bit by selection. So it's a question of how they're going to try. I'm interested to see how New Zealand tries to play against them. Will they just try and match them? Expect they know what they're going to get, but it's what they're going to give back. I'll be interested to see how they play that. They've got some great counter-attacking players, So I think whether they've worked that out, I don't know. That they're under pressure, so we'll see.
Eddie Jones, what are your thoughts about the New Zealand kicking game? So at the moment, if you were preparing a team to play against New Zealand, would you identify that as a weakness in their game at the moment?
Well, I probably at the moment I just struggle to see how they're trying to play. Like as Ewen said, traditionally they've been a high kicking team that love to play off counter attack. That's been the All Black way. Good strong defence, kick well, get the ball back, then open the game up, make the pitch big. And I just get the impression at the moment they're a bit half and half. They're trying to play, some phase type patterns, and then when they are kicking, one of the reasons they're probably not kicking as much is because they're not getting anything out of it. Like you tend to kick more when you get a result out of it. Like, that's just common sense. You keep doing what you get a result out of. When you're not getting a result out of it, and maybe they're not getting a result out because their kicking tends to be the last thing they do rather than look to break open the defence through kicking. And it's a subtle nuance, but it's a really important part of the game that if you can kick on the front foot and have obviously you got your chase harder there, you put more pressure on the team receiving the ball and you get the ball back in a better position. Whereas if you're kicking off the back foot, like the ball stopped off consecutive rucks, then generally it's harder to put pressure on that receiving side. So it's that little bit they'll be trying to work out. And I think, as Ewan said, the 9 today in today's game, and it has for the last 15 years, had an important role in terms of kicking. I can remember back in the Brumbies in 2000, I remember we did our first box kick in, I think it was game 11 of the season against the Chiefs. Yeah. And we did one and won it back and then did another one, and that were the 2 box kicks for the game. It just goes to show you how much the game's changed. Like now, you're getting 15 aerial contacts per team, at least, from box kicks. So, with the 9 shifting and changing, it's difficult to get that consistency in that area.
So on that topic there, Pemby, I saw some proposed law changes for the World Cup. Someone proposing the law changes, and they said that maybe they should try and outlaw the caterpillar ruck to try and take the volume of that kicking game out of it and try and make the game a little bit different, because that's become very centric. And Eddie's spot on. We rarely practiced box kicks back in the day. But now it's something you play England and you knew it was on, but fundamentally it wasn't really a big part of the strategy. But now it's the total default strategy. Everyone just defaults to it. You see them, they set it up, they caterpillar the ruck, put a few guys in there, and it's someone actually said they should outlaw that, building the ruck in that way, so that that means the pace of the game is up, and you've got to do maybe other things. So it's interesting that people are starting to think that way. But certainly that's changed the dynamics for wingers, what skill set they have to have, and it's just changed how the game's played.
Well, just
Would
on
you
that,
support
can I just butt in there, Pemby? Just
Sure.
on that.
Yeah, mate. Yeah.
Like part of the problem we've got is the referees don't referee the law. Once the ball's in the ruck, you can't use your hands. And they brought out an edict, I'm not exactly sure the timelines. It was about 18 months ago where they said, right, if the halfback touches the ball in the ruck, pulls it back and pulls it back to the back of a long ruck, then it's play on, right? And then for some reason, someone's complained. I don't know who it was. It'd be a high box kicking team for sure. And that's now the halfback's allowed to do that, move the ball through the ruck with his hand. And if we played the law where you can't touch the ball with your hands in the ruck, then it's sorted out, mate.
Yeah,
but the World Rugby's got no balls, mate.
Yeah, I agree with Eddie on that, because I didn't know. I was actually wondering what the law was, because I thought that's what the law was. And then I watch people doing as Eddie says. I also see players in the ruck who are lying on the ground, hand the ball up to the halfback, like literally lying on the ground, and they get like, I'm going, what's going on here? Like it's like once it's a ruck because the ball's on the ground, and and there's people formed up. That's what it is. So there's no hands in a ruck. And that didn't happen. The old boots, and you get stomped on if you put your hands anywhere near the ball. So I think that's a real the halfbacks. We saw it the other day, the halfback dummying. The referee was onto that. He didn't penalise him, no, but he definitely dummied. But touching the ball in the ruck when it's in, I don't know what the law is, and I'm glad Eddie's just clarified that there is a law, and they just don't. Well, someone's arbitrarily changed it, because it doesn't make sense to me.
How does that happen though? Like, if there is a law of the game, how can they decide what's out on the run?
Yeah, and what's his Quacker Smith? He got sent off. He got yellow carded because he thought the ball was like the area around there is like. It's not even a difficult area. You can see the ball. I don't think it's a difficult area to referee. They just have to just referee the laws. And I think because of the uncertainty, he ended up in the bin because he probably thought it was out. But you just don't know what's going on. And the halfbacks get protected in a way. They get to caterpillar. They get to touch the ball and do things. I think it's silly.
But Eddie Jones, how does that happen though? How can there be just sort of unilateral change without wider consultation about the impact that, what laws do we referee and what laws don't we referee? Because it can then ultimately, it could be a complete free-for-all every weekend.
Well, mate, you're still waiting for your strategic plan, so you can see how things operate. But it's just creep, mate. It's just creep in the game, as you spoke about last time. Okay. If they're really solid on what's important in the game. And the ruck's a ruck, so the ball's on the ground. It shouldn't be played with the hands, right? If we referee, then that's pretty simple. That is pretty simple, right? Yeah. And if the ball's at the front of the ruck and they can't get it out, then the other team's entitled to counter ruck it and do whatever they are to make it into a bun fight, right? And maybe that'll be a good part of the game again, because it'll encourage teams to get the ball out of the ruck.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on that, along with the strategic plan. We'll keep we'll keep asking the questions of World Rugby, because that does seem a bit unusual. Also, interesting to see the Professor Sir Wayne Smith had the tracksuit back on the grass. Well known to both of you, certainly an icon of the global game. As coaches, you and McKenzie, how often did you do this? How often did you sort of seek counsel from, older heads who would come down and give you a bit of a hand?
Not that often. You talk to people as you go along. talk to Eddie or whatever. You talk to people as you go along, but in the end, Eddie might do it more. I didn't do it a lot here and there. I didn't mind inviting people to come to training, but the contribution can be more cerebral than the tech. They can't do much in a training session or even in a week. You can't achieve a lot. But you can certainly look for things, and maybe if they watch it as an objective person, just watching training, and maybe make some suggestions. That can be useful. But he's been in and out of the setup, and he's been involved in other aspects of New Zealand rugby. So all of the players.
Well, he still has a role there.
All the players will have encountered him many times in different ways. So it wouldn't be unusual for him to be able to turn up and actually make some sort of contribution. So he certainly knows he knows success. So that's even on that topic alone, he'd be good to have around. But you just got to assess whether you're going to get value out of it or whether it just becomes a distraction. So I definitely had people come and visit and give opinions, but it was probably more to me rather than the group. It's more about watch it and tell me what you think. If you see something where we're deficient that I'm not seeing or whatever, you got to be not too proud to be able to do that and say, because sometimes you might get too obsessed with something and you're just not seeing something else, and it might be really obvious. So if you feel like you're banging your head against the wall, it's an objective perspective is not a bad thing.
Eddie, Wayne Smith is someone who you know and admire. In terms of his philosophy, how do you think he would be assessing and contributing and imagining how the All Blacks can improve their game? What are the sorts of things do you think that he would be emphasising?
Look, well, I think his role there is to coach the coaches. So I think he's got that role in the whole of New Zealand. And it's a great initiative by the New Zealand Rugby Union that they don't lose that intellectual property, because he's a clever coach and he's been very successful and he's a good guy. So I would think he'd be there just supporting Scott Robinson, just saying, have you had a think about this? Have you had a look at this? Is this an area we can tidy up? So he'd be just trying to support Scott in that way. And that's like having gold, mate. Yeah, that's absolute gold for him.
Mm. Yeah, good to see. Every time I see him around and about the game, it makes you feel good because he is such a quality individual, and makes a great contribution and has done for many, many years. Just before we move off, or indeed I ask you for your predictions on what's going to happen, just as coaches, these big games, we talk about nervousness, we're talking about fear, we're talking about haven't lost for however long, 50 test matches in a row, all of this stuff. This is obviously grist for the mill for the media and for the fans and for everything that builds up around it. How do you cope? How do you manage? How do you think about it? And how does it sort of penetrate the week? And how do you deal with it? Ewen McKenzie?
I wouldn't be spending too long talking about records and things like that. I mean, that you can look in any direction and find a record that was and now isn't. That's the nature of sport. Things change. So there's no certainties in a two-horse race. We saw that in the AFL last night. Collingwood beating Adelaide in Adelaide. There's no certainty, so you've just got to. That's part of the. But it's pressure. I get it, but the pressure's coming. The pressure for the team should be around the performance side of it, like what they're going to do. In the end, you've got your troops, and I always talk about the strategy side of it because that's how the winning of the game is selling the strategy to the players, and then obviously getting them to be able to execute that in training and then repeat it on the field. You've got to get that bit right. But I think if the coaches are both very good coaches, so I think that they'll both have a strategy. It's a question of whether they can impart it, and that's the contest. For me, it's not about the media headlines or whatever. That's the contest, and that's what you'd be talking about. You wouldn't be talking about any other stuff. It's got no relevance. They know that. They would know it from their childhood, whatever. But it's not worth talking about. You can only talk about what they can do on the field to influence the outcome. And so,
but Eddie Jones, it's an unavoidable distraction. I'm just asking, in a week like this, where people are. They're walking down the street, they're in the coffee shops, their cousins called them, like wherever they move, they're going to be hearing about this. And I suppose the insight I'm looking for from you is that, that management. Ewan's made it pretty clear that, he wouldn't be talking about it. He'd be focusing on the strategy and the plan. From your point of view, how do you go about managing these big-ish weeks? Because the distraction is there. It's just how it's managed.
Well, there's distraction every week, mate. It's just whether the distraction's inside or outside. So you always, as a coach, that's one of the things you're always trying to do is manage distraction, whether it be a good last win or a bad defeat or some sort of record that people are talking about. So, you're just focusing on the process. But as you know, sometimes the coach, and it's done less these days, I think, and again, because of social media, can put himself out there, which, you've done to the detriment of my reputation sometimes, right? And you take the heat, which takes the pressure off the team, right? No, I'm joking, but takes the pressure off the team.
I know.
Yeah, and you've seen coaches do that. I think I told you I was watching that Dallas Cowboy, and then I read his book, and he was talking about leading up to the Super Bowl game, and he was on the Jimmy Johnson was on the show with the owner. And he said to the owner, to the owner of the other team, he said, we're gonna bust your ass in this game. And then he actually went on air and said that, and it took all the pressure off the players because all the pressure was on him now. Yeah, and the players felt actually a bit relieved that the pressure was on him and not on the players to perform. And they went out and did it.
Yeah, very true. So listen, Eddie Jones, we'll start with you. What happens? Who wins on Saturday?
Yeah, well, my gut feeling is going to be a sort of 18-15, 18-12 sort of game. Because I think both teams will be want to play the game fairly tight, and if the conditions are like it is, it's going to be hard to score. Referee, high contest at the breakdown, so it'll become a penalty shootout.
And who wins 18-15? Who gets there in the end?
Well, I like both teams. I've got affection for South Africa, and I've got admiration for New Zealand. I shouldn't say I like New Zealand. I've got admiration. So I want to see a really good, tough game of rugby, 18-15. One way or the other, I don't care.
And it's exactly, it'll roll either way. What about you, Ewan? What are you seeing?
Yeah, like I see it as a contest up front, and I think the teams have been picked accordingly. So, that contest will move around the field, but it's going to be who's effective. Again, if you go back and look, the All Blacks have made 3 line breaks against Argentina in 2 games. So they're not functioning in terms of their classic attack. So it's going to get back to the forward packs to see how that battle goes. I'd probably favour South Africa slightly in that battle, but I think New Zealand at home will be just good enough. But I don't think it'll be a high scoring game. I think New Zealand might just get there.
And through that discussion, Ewan was referring to the article done by Finn Fruin from Favourable Matchups, where he's got plenty of data. That's, in fact, on the Rugby Unity Substack. So if you'd like to jump over there, there's plenty of evidence that's been presented. So I'm sure you will enjoy reading that. So there we go.
What about
lots
on
to
that
look forward to.
You see, in that article, their record under Steve Hansen, 87% winning. Like that's incredible. That is incredible. It shows you what a good job he did.
107 Test matches, and he had that was his winning record.
But that's
107.
That's what I was trying to say before. They had that team in the 80s. The Wettons and McDowell and Fox and all that. They had a team there that was, and then. I got to play against them, Eddie. We got to play against them at the end, right? So 89, 90 Wallabies win the test against them in New Zealand, in Wellington, and then World Cup knock them out semi-final, win a series 2-1 in 92, 93, 94, get the one-off test with the Gregan tackle. So that period there, they were in transition because all of those fantastic players that we'd read about, Jones, and there's so many good players they had. But then Jonah Lomu arrives and whatever, a 95 World Cup, and then from then on so that's the phase they're in at the moment. They're in that rebuilding phase and they're trying to find those new players, and there's no, they weren't winning Bledisloes in that period, but it was, that was a tough period for them, and then you go again, and so they're in that period again, but they'll fix it up pretty quick, and South Africa's probably still got more of the older crew, so that's still a little bit ahead of them because I don't see the 22, 23, 24-year-olds en masse coming through there, especially up front. So we'll see where they go. That might be next year because you're definitely, I can say, we got to the World Cup in 95 and we had gone over the back of the hill when you look back. And I'm happy to say that. And so you can't be that team that gets to a World Cup and it's all over. You've already done your best work, so that's what you don't want to be. So New Zealand, there's pain at the moment, and they'll hopefully, the rugby unions themselves understand what's going on, and they've got to do all they can to provide the players through their pathways to be able to be those star players in a few years' time. But they've got to introduce them and give them the experience. So, it's a really interesting time to watch those two countries who are so used to winning have the odd loss. Intriguing
as it is as we look to 2027 in Australia. And for everybody listening around the world, we now have listeners in well over 100 countries. Start making your plans to get down to Australia in 2027. It will be a tournament to remember. And just another reference there to Finn Fruin's article on the Rugby Unity Substack. And it does, bring lots of evidence and data, which I'm sure you'll enjoy reading as you prepare to watch the game in New Zealand on Saturday. But before the match in New Zealand, there will be a game in Australia, in Townsville, where it will be 28 degrees at 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon. I don't know whose idea it was to play in Townsville in the afternoon, but there you go. It'll be hot. It will be steamy. They've announced the teams. Ewen, McKenzie, no real surprises in either of the selections, and should be a very fast track up there in Townsville for this match between Australia and Argentina.
Yeah, I think obviously Robertson's staying there. That's a vote of confidence in him at loosehead. Hooper going into the second row, for me, that was an easy solution to be able to bring Harry Wilson back in. But I don't know if that's the best combination. I don't know if it's best for Tom Hooper to go into the second row. He's been in really good form. So I think they'll end up having a hard decision in the back row, especially if Skelton was available. But Skelton leaving as, Hooper again in the second row is not Skelton. So, that means there's probably a slightly different game. But you can fit the good players into the pack. I don't know if that's always the best strategy, but that's what they've done. Liner coming in was probably a surprise. I thought they might have just stuck with what they had. And then obviously Callaway, I think, was a straight swap. It was a fairly logical sort of step, I think. So they brought Tizano back on the bench, which is good, and a couple of changes there on the bench. And Slipper didn't make the 23, so that's interesting too. So again, if you're talking about transition, you've got the old stalwart, and now they're starting to, rewarding Tom Robertson for his efforts, keeping Bell on the bench as an impact player, and Slipper's missed out altogether. So there's some subtle changes there, but no surprises. But you could have done it a slightly different way. Yeah.
Your view, Eddie Jones, on the selection for Australia?
Yeah, I think as Ewan said, it's pretty straightforward. The only one would be Williams as lock. Like, he always impresses me. He's got a good work rate. He's a tough guy. He just obviously lacks a bit of bulk, but he plays well above his weight. And I think, Hooper, those back rowers can sometimes turn into good left-hand side locks, but I think they're expecting him to play right-hand side. So that's a big onus on the flanker to play on the right-hand side. So whether you get the value out of him there is a question mark, and I think the rest is pretty straightforward, mate.
Yeah, I agree.
The loss of Skelton, clearly a big loss for Australia, but for someone like Skelton playing in Townsville, 28 degrees, it would have been a big challenge.
I think he's been playing. Like, Skelton looks pretty fit. Like, he looks pretty good for me. Like, he's been around the trap scene. He looks pretty, and he's getting through the minutes all right. So I don't think, the temperature's going to be tough on everyone. But I think he'd handle that all right. It's more about the game style. He's given some good punch.
So what do we lose then? What does Australia lose?
We lose the go forward, and where he's been good. I like the fact that we've been able to use the short side quite well, and he's been one of those contributing forwards where he'll change from the open side to the short side with a carry or something like that, and that's subtle, but it exposes a lazy short side defence, and you can get at certain players, and I think that we've done that quite well in the last few games. So I think that is a bit of a loss. I don't know if we're going to still try and play the same way. And I agree 100% with what Eddie's saying. I think Williams has been a really good player for us, not talked about enough. I think he's been a really good contributor. Whatever the game style is, he's been able to mix it, and he definitely plays above his weight. So he'll be disappointed he's not getting an opportunity to start, but he'll wear that on the chin. So I think Skelton's a big loss, but they'll change their line out stuff a little bit as a result, but. If Hooper's on the right-hand side in the scrum, that's not a great outcome for him.
Eddie Jones, how hard is it to change sort of game styles when you do lose someone like a Skelton who has been such a dominant player? How difficult is it to move the team along in a different direction now that you have different players in those key positions?
Look, for someone like Joe, he'll be well on top of that. They'll make the adjustments. But I think going back to the loss of Skelton, there's three things for me. Firstly, he was almost the focal point of their forwards' attack, and it seemed like everything was built around him for his attack. Secondly, like, he's an aggressor, mate. He's an aggressor, and he takes it to the opposition. All ins. He's on the line a few times of hitting Blake's laid, but he makes them known he's out there. And rugby's always been a game where you've had to have dominance up front, and he gives you that edge because not many people want to mix it with him. Because he's 150 Ks, mate. When he hits you hard, and you stay hit. And I think the third, aligned with that is his value in the scrum. Like, having a guy like that in the scrum gives you enormous value, 150 Ks. Like, you can get a little edge in the opposition front row, but then it stops when you got that 150 Ks settled down. And the third thing, I reckon, is just his leadership. He's the de facto captain of the team. You can see the mentality of the team is built around him. And missing that will be a significant loss. So, we'll need other guys to step up. Wilson will need to step up. He's done a good job as captain, but he'll need to step up his physicality and leading the charge. And whether Hooper can do that from the second row is questionable.
Paul Williams from New Zealand is the referee. What can we expect from him?
Outstanding, mate. We had him last week. I really like him as a referee. I think he's a really good man. No, seriously. I think he's a really good man. He referees. He's concerned about the game. Referees the game hard around the breakdown, encourages space around the breakdown. He's very consistent. The only area he's probably not as strong as other referees, and it usually goes, if you're really good around the breakdown, you're not so good in the scrum. And if you're really good at the scrum, you're not so good at the breakdown. It's very rare they're good at both. So the scrum will be probably, there'll be a few decisions that maybe people raise their eyebrows at, but I reckon around the breakdown, mate, he's really good. And he's a good communicator, good guy.
What will that mean in terms of then, how does that translate into what we see then on the field? We see sort of end-to-end movement of the ball.
High-scoring game, mate. 28 degrees will be a high-scoring game. You go up to 50, 60 points, which could suit Argentina. Yeah, if they can get some front football and they get quick ball, they've got enough ways to hurt you. Particularly is that Gonzalez playing?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, him and Matera, they're as good as any back rowers.
Kremer's there, so
Kremer's in. Matera's been moved to 8. Albanese is still out, so Santiago Carreras played most of the game last week at 10. He stays there. And then you got Santiago Chocobares at 12. And then wider out, you got Mateo Carreras and Batista Del Gui, who I thought were pretty impressive against New Zealand last week. So, there's plenty of attack there. But is it difficult for the Argentinians? What will it be like for them, Ewen McKenzie, coming over, getting settled? Certainly the weather in Cordoba was hot the other week against the All Blacks. So, they have been playing and preparing in reasonably hot conditions. But it's a different kind of heat up in Townsville, isn't it? It'll be very steamy.
No, there's no doubt about that. But I think that they've done well in New Zealand. I think they'll want to do better in Australia in terms of outcomes. So I think that's probably a goal for them, is to be able to travel here and do a bit better than they have in the past. So I don't see any reason why they can't. They've got a pretty good side there. So if I look at the selection, and Eddie's talked about the breakdown. You've got McWright, now they've got Tizano on the bench, so obviously I think Australia's anticipating that there might be some opportunity in that space, but the contest is going to be tough, so they've got a couple of good exponents there. So scrum will probably negate. I don't think there'll be much there in terms of the scrum contest. Line-out will be important. And then it just gets back to still be able to catch eyeballs, because Argentina are actually quite good at the kick chase side of things. But the thing is that they take risks. There's a lot of bounce passes in the last game and they came off. So they're pretty nippy, and they'll take risks, and the ball might look a bit messy, but they'll play with plenty of enthusiasm. So I don't see the fact that they're in the top 4 consistently means that they've got things to tick off their list, and I think winning in Australia will be certainly one of the things I'd like to start doing more regularly. They've been probably winning in New Zealand with some regularity in recent times, so winning in Australia will be a challenge for them. That's what I'd be doing if I was coaching. I'd say, here's we need to do better there. Why aren't we winning there?
So, in terms of a result on Saturday, what do you see?
Oh yeah, I think it'll be much different. In some ways, a different game. It'll still be fairly physical up front, but I think the ball will move a bit more. Both teams have got exponents of opportunistic players, so I'm thinking, it's going to be a sort of the sort of 35-30 type thing. I'd like to think Australia can win that.
So, Eddie, who do you see winning the match, Argentina or Australia?
Argentina get out quick, but I think Australia's newfound toughness and stay in the game. I think they might have an edge in the line out, which might get them enough ball to get home.
Yeah, very good. All right, so that is on Saturday afternoon in Townsville. Just quickly move to some comments. As I say, the third voice that we like to feature here on Rugby Unity, the podcast that is helping to secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. And from Burns Steel to Burn Things on YouTube, great conversation, gents. Rugby union's direction is concerning. I really don't enjoy rugby league. We need to be watching world rugby with a microscope and kicking back on decisions which seem to change the heart of our game. Werner Behan On YouTube, 100% agree with Eddie and Ewan. Awesome commentary. We need to preserve our game, and certain changes are ruining the beautiful game. Greetings from South Africa. And Mr. Papermake says, rugby needs heroes and villains. This is what sparks interest. Rugby fans love rivalry. We need to market the rivalry, and we need to get the niggle between the teams going. Press conferences are boring. Players and coaches are too bloody humble when asking boring questions, when answering questions from boring questions from reporters. Why can't the media conjure up some controversy to help this along? So there you go. Anyway, we have a couple of questions, boys. So from Matt Huppets, he says, do you think the crowd attendance in Townsville will be a good litmus test for how the Wallabies are perceived outside the major rugby markets? I know the Fiji test in Newcastle had a good attendance, but I wonder if this was boosted by people driving from Sydney. By contrast, Townsville is rugby league heartland and is 1,600 plus kilometres from Brisbane. Interesting to see if it will be half full or sold out. Ewen McKenzie, what do you think about the crowd and whether or not the Wallabies will be able to draw a crowd in Townsville?
I think, crowd's important. It's not, you want to have the look that the game is in good shape. Australia's played a lot of their games against Argentina on the Gold Coast, and that hasn't been well attended. And I could never understand why they kept repeating the fixture, because it wasn't well attended, even though there's no reason why it shouldn't have been a decent crowd. But since that time, Argentina have been far more consistent and far more been higher up the ladder than we have in terms of ranking. So I'd like to think there's enough in the contest, and I think Australia's recent performances would definitely draw a full house, just out of interest, for local people who would not get much more opportunity other than watching the Cowboys play. Just give them something else to look at and see. So hopefully I'm hoping that's the case. People turn out, and I'm hoping it is the high scoring game that we've talked about. That'll reward them for turning up.
Well, I reckon. I tend to agree with you, Ewan. I think that the mood in Australia is lifting around the Wallabies. I think Wallaby fans, but I think more generally sports fans have been super impressed with the way that they've played over the last few weeks, and particularly the victory at Ellis Park. Just generally in conversations with people who may not normally be that interested in rugby, I sense that there is a real mood backing this young Australian team. I think people like the way they play. It certainly promises a lot, and I think it will be a very large crowd in what is a fantastic stadium there in Townsville. It's a magnificent regional stadium. So let's hope that we can get the sold-out sign there in Townsville on Saturday. So Forks and Pillows on YouTube says, hello all three, love the podcast. I'm the CM for my local club in Spain, Club Rugby Toledo, and would love a shout out. So there you go, Forks and Pillows. There's the shout out to Club Rugby Toledo. A question for the two experts. When speaking about positionless rugby, how do you judge what the Canadian women's team are doing in terms of offence? Thank you. Ewen McKenzie, have you had enough of a look at the Canadian women's team?
I haven't.
No?
I haven't. I confess I have not.
Okay.
But I will now. I will make an effort in the next 7 days to have a good look at them and see if I can see something interesting.
What about you, Eddie Jones? In the 6 hours that you're not working on the Japanese team every day, have you had the opportunity to have a look at the way the Canadian women's team are attacking?
Well, the concept of positionless rugby would mean that they're trying to play with a bit of flow, and just trying to keep the ball moving. And to do that, you generally have to have a team that's played together for a fair period of time. And I think that Canadian team has. So, there's nothing new in rugby, but if they're doing it well, I haven't seen enough of them, but they're obviously doing well in the World Cup. If they've got that synergy and cohesion, you can play that sort of rugby.
Do you see that as an emerging trend heading towards 2027, that there'll start to be more position-less rugby, or not?
No.
No,
Oh,
not going to happen.
That's why we have positions, mate. That's why we've got big front rowers, locks, back rowers. Yeah. Like if we want to have positionless, it would go like rugby league. You remember, the great Brian Smith used to say he wanted 13 players, 6'1", 100 Ks playing rugby league, and you can play rugby league like that, right? But rugby is a different game. Yeah. It actually requires positional specificity, so you can still attack with a less structure, and that's all you're talking about is attacking with less structure by having positionless. But you look at it now. Look at most front rows now. They carry the ball 6 to 8 times a game, right? That's a fair bit of your attack, and most of the stats show that most teams play 60% of their attack within one pass of the ruck. That's the average. Yep. So you can play positionless as long as you get that momentum and you can create quick ruck speed. He's maybe had too many tequilas, mate. No, what's Spain? What do they drink in Spain?
I don't know what they drink in Spain.
Sangria.
Anyway, and Sangria. And listen, I'm sure he's very pleased with the way the Spanish have played in the Women's Rugby World Cup as well. Anyway, a final question to you, Eddie Jones, and a big thanks to you, the audience, for your questions and your comments. Please keep them coming because we do want to feature you here on Rugby Unity. But Back Taken Help asks, great episode. How much does university rugby in Japan hinder player development? Are there academies, development squads within professional teams that young players can grow through instead?
I think that's a letter from the JRFU, mate, trying to get me into trouble. Look, the situation in Japan, there's high school rugby, there's university rugby, and there's no development for elite players. Now, because university rugby is virtually community rugby, it's a club at a university. They have 150 kids. The first team might get a little bit more than the rest of the team, but generally they play as a club. And there's no elite development. Yep. There's a push for the League One teams to have academies and for those players to be dual registration. And I think in time that'll happen and that'll make a lot of sense. There's a Japanese volleyball player, Ishikawa, who's probably one of the best volleyball players in the world. So he was one of the first examples of a university student playing professional volleyball in Italy, and he was allowed to continue his study. So I think that'll eventually happen in rugby in Japan. It probably won't be, or definitely won't be in my time, but in the future it'll happen.
Okay, so Eddie Jones, also Pacific Nations Cup this weekend. The first match, Samoa versus Fiji on Saturday. And on Sunday, you take on Japan. How has your week been? And what are you expecting in the match against the USA?
Well, you're saying it's 28 in Townsville. It's 35 here. It is hot, mate. It is hot. We trained in 35 degrees. Won the toss, wouldn't have been bowling, mate. Would have been batting. Right. No, we've had a good preparation. They've trained really well. Good young team. It's whether we can just – there'll be a period in the game where USA will come really hard. It's at a county fairground. Crowd will be tight, and we just got to weather that storm. We can weather, there'll be one or two storms in the game. We should be okay, but it'll be a tough game. And Japan, USA, for some reason.
What sort of interest is there? What sort of and much interest?
Well, you don't see
much interest in the game.
All I know is the Cowboys are playing Philadelphia in 2 days, 2 hours, and 32 seconds. Like that's all you see here, mate. Cowboys, Philadelphia. I know everything about their history. I've seen every one of their controversial games.
And the college football's underway as well.
Huge,
so those.
And that's the interesting story too.
Something else, isn't it?
Because like Belichick, right? The most winning Patriots coach, one of the most winning coaches. I don't know, 4 or 5 Super Bowls, whatever. So he's had his first game as a head coach in North Carolina. They got pumped 41-10. And now, like the headlines, what's happened to his legacy? Can his coach? Underprepared team. Give me a break. Like the guy's won 6 or 7 Super Bowls or something, and now he can't coach.
No. The NFL is a monster. There's no doubt about that. American football, but college football as well. Super interesting. So there we go. Well, listen, that's a good conversation, a good preview. The women's rugby is obviously on over the weekend, and we don't have time to talk about that here this week. So just go back to my preview program with Bella McKenzie on Rugby Unity, where we went through all of it. But I did see that... Sia Kapesi-Palu, the Australian number 8, the captain, she's back for the first time for the important match against England, which will decide whether or not Australia can go through to the quarterfinals. And indeed, 4 sellouts, I think, are on the cards at the Women's Rugby World Cup for this round, which I think is, again, very impressive, and a number of great statistics released by World Rugby about the women's game. And again, all covered in that episode with Bella McKenzie. So, Ewen McKenzie and Eddie Jones, thank you so much for coming back once again. And to you, the audience, thank you for coming once again. Please like, subscribe, share, get the message out there about Rugby Unity. We are pleased with all of the reaction so far and delighted with your support. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rugby weekend this weekend. Please be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.